This is a 1983 Mercedes-Benz W123, and it's probably the definitive Mercedes-Benz, the kind of car that helped them secure the reputation as building some of the best cars in the world. The W123 is the 70s and 80s equivalent of the modern E-Class, and they sold 2.7 million of the damn things between 1976 and 1986, making it the most successful Mercedes at the time. The 123 was available as a short and long wheelbase saloon, an estate, and a coupe. This car is also the definitive taxi, and the reason so many taxis not only in Germany but also all over the world were Mercedes W123s was that they're just so bulletproof. You see so many of these with 1,000,000 miles on them. The over-engineering and durability of this model, as I've already said, helped consolidate the reputation of Mercedes-Benz the world over. Just like the Land Crabber I reviewed a few months ago, this car went rallying, not because it was fast, but because it was rugged and dependable. The styling of the 123 is an effective modernisation of the classic lines on the old W114. Mercedes didn't need to reinvent the wheel because they already had a car that looked classy and looked excellent. The biggest change at the front were these horizontally opposed rectangular front lights. Originally, more basic W123s had two individual circular lamps within the outline of the rectangular one, but from 1983, the year this car was built, the Series 3 W123s got this single headlamp. Of course, they're alongside the iconic and ever-present Mercedes grille, which is quite large, but it's not too large. It's just right for the styling of this car. I must also comment that this being an old Mercedes, it still has the proper three-pointed star on the top of the grille, something that signifies the class associated with a Mercedes-Benz, and something that I really mourn the loss of. I think one of the best parts about driving one of these is being able to look down from the dashboard onto this three-pointed star. And at the back there are these new wider rear lamps with these ribs through them. The thinking with the rib design was to ensure you could always see the lights no matter the conditions. Dust and snow would collect on one side of the ribs, allowing constant visibility. As we come around to the side, you see the indicators wrap around at the front for a little bit more safety. And these wheel trims are my favourite parts of any Mercedes of the era. They're body coloured, and so if you have a yellow W123, you will have yellow hubcaps, which the best thing about any old Mercedes is the body coloured hubcaps for me. Also, these brilliant Mercedes branded mud flaps. The rest of the changes to the old shape are clearly there, but they're stealthy and subtle. Through this philosophy, Mercedes didn't really need to make massive changes to their new models, just enough to effectively modernise them and keep them fresh on the market. You could be tricked into thinking that this is actually a major facelift of the old W114. Very little effort went into making an entirely new style. This is definitely a case of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Generation on generation at the time, Mercedes just fine-tuned and perfected their style, and I think the 123 is the epitome of that style. This car is understated and classy. It's not a shouty car, not the kind of Mercedes that goes around saying, "Look at me, I'm a Mercedes-Benz." This car knows that it's cool. This car knows that it's the best car on the road. Apart from the general style, there are a number of components carried over from the old model. Under the skin stuff like suspensions and some of the engines. Petrol cars were available with 4 or 6 cylinder engines, with the straight 6 being the new one. The engine choices did change during production, with some power increases and modifications to existing engines, along with a new 4-banger from 1980. The diesel engines are the really iconic ones, available with 4 or 5 cylinder engines. While chronically slow, they were also mega tough, and from 1978 you could get a turbo diesel, the first one seen in a production car. This particular one is a 1983 Mercedes-Benz 230e with a 2.3 litre 4-cylinder engine producing 134 brake horsepower strapped to a 4-speed automatic gearbox driving the rear wheels. To be honest though, it doesn't really matter how fast it is. That's not what this car's really about. Now, I don't aim to do buying guides, but I should mention that not everything is utterly supreme in these cars. They do rust in a number of places, especially pre-1980 cars, and the fuel injection systems are very fiddly. Also, the 4-cylinder engines aren't quite as reliable as the 6-cylinder ones. In true Mercedes fashion, the automatics are the ones to go for. The kind of people that go around car auctions in mustard-coloured pants are now the kind of people funneling money into these things. And as much as I don't like that kind of thing, there's a reason for it. These are just very, very good, well-engineered, dependable, cool, and most importantly, iconic cars. These cars were so good, in fact, that when they were new, the waiting list was so long that lightly used examples were more expensive than brand new models. This being a Mercedes, the options are almost endless. There were so many colours available for both interior and exterior, with loads of different seat materials available in addition to the colours. You could also get a number of really nice features as production goes on, such as cruise control, power windows, central locking, air conditioning, anti-lock brakes, heated seats, a radio telephone, automatic climate control in some markets, and preheating, so the cabin can warm up before you get into the car. Mercedes having some kind of intelligence, they continue to update the car throughout production, responding to the customer's issues and technological advances to make it as good as it could be. The 123 wasn't the first car to have all these features, but altogether it produces a really attractive spec list for a car from the early 80s. But then again, a 123 with all these features would have been a very, very expensive car. A 280e with no options costs the same as a V12 Jaguar XJ. You are paying for the quality and engineering. The main competitors for the W123 were things like the BMW 5 Series, Peugeot 604, Volvo 200, Citroën CX and the Rover SD1. That's the one I think I'd have. But that's because I think it's exciting. That's not an indicator of a good car. It's telling of the quality of both of them. The Mercedes was just the best built. And now I'm sat in the glorious interior of the 123, and I love the colour of this interior. And these seats are weird actually, they're very, very comfortable, but they are very, very springy as well, which I didn't expect when I first sat down, so I'm bouncing in this car, but everything just feels like it's designed to be good. Not designed to be blingy, not designed to stand out to you. It's designed for the person that knows what they want and knows that Mercedes make good cars. In front of me there's this really, really large 4-spoke steering wheel with a big, big flat pad in front. I suppose that's for safety. It's also very soft. That's also where you push for your horn, but you need ignition for that. And in front of me are these clean, really concise gauges. Of course, you have a tachometer over on the right, you have the clock that I've just mentioned, and then you have a speedometer and 86,000 miles. And on the left hand side you have your auxiliary gauges, so you have fuel level, water temperature, oil pressure, and then an economy gauge there at the bottom. I suppose that's just a vacuum gauge with the word economy written on it. And below you have this line of warnings, so you have your main beam, battery, I suppose that's brake pads, but I'm not 100% sure, and brake, so maybe that's brake failure or the handbrake, I'm not sure. Over on the right hand side of the steering wheel is your only stalk that does everything, so you've got indicators right and left, and just the quality of that, utterly, utterly marvellous. Then of course you have your flash and your main beam, and then if you twist you have your wipers, speed 1, speed 2 and speed 3, and then apparently you push for wash. Additionally, on the right hand side over here you have your lights, so if you twist to the left there is your right parking lights and left parking lights and side lights and headlights. We're in a certain era here, folks. That kind of buzz isn't the kind of noise you'd hear on a car nowadays. You'd hear a much more refined bong of some kind. But we're still in the early 80s here, so we'll forgive it for that. Of course, over here you have the handbrake, the umbrella style handbrake that Mercedes is so synonymous with. The dashboard itself is very bare, but that's not a bad thing. You just have this strip of wood going along the centre, and the only bit of trim on this car is just that bit of wood there that's unstuck. 35 years old, I think we can forgive it for that. And in the middle of the dashboard you have this slider, which I think is for fresh air, and then you have this row of switches here. It does look a little bit plain without switches here, and yes, the switches are black, there's no chrome or anything like that, but in this era chrome was becoming less desirable as a material. And so you have your heated rear window, and all these switches just feel so nice. If I switch the camera around, this button here, that button is for the rear light. And then finally you have your headlamp levelling switch. Now that's something that is mandated on modern cars, but for a car from 1983 it's not the kind of switch that I was expecting in the interior, but it just shows that Mercedes-Benz were that kind of manufacturer. Below that, of course, you have your climate control, which again is backed with some wood, and again just peeling ever so slightly, but you have twin temperature adjustments, one for each side, so twin zone climate control. And then you have, of course, your fan switch. Again, everything feels heavy as well. Everything feels very well designed, very well made. Everything feels like it will last forever. Nothing in this car feels like someone could come in and snap that off at all. It just feels like absolute quality. Of course, up here you have your directions, so this is for the screen and this is for feet, and that is your amount, so not very much, a lot. And below here you have a place for a stereo, which doesn't have the faceplate in it. I think the faceplate might be in the glove box, but I'll have to have a look in a minute for that. And below this you then have an ashtray, of course. And moving down from the ashtray then you have your automatic gear selector, so park, reverse, neutral, drive, sport, and then your low. And again, this just feels like a component that is very, very, very well engineered. It doesn't feel like something special as such, but it just feels like something that is made really, really nicely. And then moving down from that you have, then it gets rather plain, and then annoyingly the hazard light switch and the adjustment for the passenger mirror are not quite on the same plane as each other. That's really annoying, but that's a satisfying click. And then of course you have your adjustment for your passenger mirror. The driver's mirror adjustment is still on the passenger's door. This isn't a car that has a lot of electronics in it. It's all very simple, it's all very classic. And then if we move on again, you have this carpeted center storage section here, and then this lovely, lovely armrest which is attached to the passenger seat. And if we put it up, it then clicks into place, and then to get it back down again, you press that button there. If we have a look at the doors, I suppose we should start with the door handle, which is chromed, and just open the door, and then there's just an air of quality about this car that is absolutely amazing. It's like nothing you see on even any kind of modern car, never mind car of this era. Of course you have manual window winders which act really, really very, very quickly. And then below there we have these little very, very narrow door pockets. I mean, they've got the room, they could have expanded a little bit more, but you just get these little tiny door pockets. And of course you have an armrest slash door pull. It's hard in a car as good as this to notice anything that could be considered a flaw, but I think I've found one. And it's to do with the seat adjustment. To move it forwards and backwards, of course, you have this switch here which just acts like normal, moves the seat backwards and forwards, all fine. However, the one to do the backrest is down here, and to get your hand in there around the seatbelt, it's really very narrow, that space you have to work with. And so the most awkward part of this car is adjusting the backrest. This isn't the kind of car you fling round a B road. This is a car to enjoy and to relax in and to glide around town in with an automatic gearbox, putting very little effort into it and just being relaxed. This isn't even the pinnacle of Mercedes. Of course, you could have an S-Class, which had more of everything and was the car that Mercedes really experimented on and innovated, whereas the 123 was the class below and was just as good as a car could be. So if you look at the steering and suspension, it's not particularly innovative, but it's just as good was in 1976. Steering is a box setup, so it's a little bit old-fashioned, but at the front you get double wishbone suspension, and at the back you get semi-trailing arms, all with coil springs. Up at the top, of course, you have your sun visors, which is completely plain on the driver's side, which is maybe a little bit disappointing. I maybe would have expected a little slot for parking tickets and stuff, but either way. And then of course you have an interior light, as you can see, and then your passenger side sun visor does have a mirror in it. And now I'm sat in the back, and this isn't actually the place to be in this car. You sit very close to the rear screen, which just feels a little bit weird. I'm not sure, it just feels a little bit closer than in most cars, but the seats just so comfortable, so naturally reclined and comfortable to sit in. Of course, no rear headrests, but that's because of the age of the car. But you do get rear seat belts, which are a bit of a novelty back at this era. But I'm a little bit close to this front seat. There's not much legroom. I mean, this front seat is a little bit too far back for my liking, but it's set at the driving position of the person that owns the car. And yeah, I do feel a tiny bit claustrophobic, but it does scallop a little bit around here, so there's some room for your legs. Additionally, around here you have these map nets. And on the door card, again, it's all very nice. And you have, of course, manual windows, which feel the same as the ones in the front, but you do get your own ashtray, one on each side. So the kids or the passengers in your taxi can have a fag while they're in the back. Finally, of course, and probably most importantly, you get your armrest in the centre. On the parcel shelf you have these two Pioneer speakers, which I wouldn't have expected would have been standard, but they look correct for the period, so I'm not so sure anymore. But just over to the passenger side, which again is annoying me slightly, it should be in the middle, but you have the Mercedes-Benz first aid kit, which is original, never opened, never used. This is a 37-year-old first aid kit from a Mercedes W123, and flipping heck, how cool's that? There are just a few details that make a particular car stand out, and for this to still be intact 37 years after the car rolled off the production line, it's just really quite special. Finally, we'll have a look in the boot, and the quality of this is just absolutely outstanding. And of course you have a warning triangle, and it's really large. You've got these nice big bins down the side, and then underneath the boot carpet, which is velcroed on. I'm not sure whether that's factory standard or it's put in by the owner, but it wouldn't surprise me. And then below there we have a spare wheel and the original Mercedes toolkit. This isn't luxury in the form many of you would expect it to take. This Mercedes doesn't cosset you or wow you with its pure opulence. It's understated and very clever, very subtle. Everything is just good, well designed and well built with good materials. My example for this is the seats. They're very good and very comfortable, but they don't make you want to fall asleep. Mercedes wanted to keep the driver alert, so they aren't armchairs. They're very finely engineered to do just what Mercedes wanted them to do. It's a form of luxury we don't see anymore, an almost utilitarian form of luxury. But they did put an awful lot of thought into safety. They had a very stiff shell with side impact beams, proper crumple zones, a collapsible steering column, servo-assisted all-round disc brakes, and you could get a driver's airbag along with the ABS I previously mentioned. It wasn't cutting edge like the contemporary S-Class was, but it brought all that technology down a peg to a position where more people could benefit from it. The people who believe that this is the last really iconic Mercedes, they aren't wrong. I think this is probably the last Mercedes that was both over-engineered, modern and executive, while also being simple, reliable and dependable. Every taxicab in the world can't be wrong, and just sitting in it enamours you. It just makes you feel better about the world. This is a quality item, and before I came here, I always thought these were really, really good cars, but I didn't really want one. They didn't speak to me as such, but actually having sat in it, you just feel so good. And looking down the bonnet towards that three-pointed star there on the front, something that can only be replicated in another Mercedes-Benz. And this is probably the best Mercedes-Benz. To use that famous Mercedes tagline, it's engineered like no other car in the world. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button and maybe subscribe as well by clicking here. It really, really helps the channel, helps me and pushes me to make more videos like this. If you've got any suggestions or things that you think I'm doing wrong, please put them in the description below. And additionally, please click here to watch a video on a lovely straight-six engine Triumph Vitesse. I'll see you in the next one.